Hey, left, right, out, March 18th. And we are going to depart a little bit away from what we've been doing, which is, more of the Russian news. Oops, sorry, gotta move my stuff up here. The tactical analysis and whatnot. We're going to talk, maybe brush on that a little bit, but I'm going back to the stuff that I'm really passionate about. I think it's the next, or the first node in what is destroying our Western civilization, let's just say that, especially this country and this monetary policy. So we had the first rate hike, it's quarter point, pretty uneventful. BB gun at an elephant. So the interesting thing, though, is if you look at the dissenting vote with Bullard, he wanted a half point. He wanted a 0.5% on there. And then it turns out another Fed governor came out, Waller, I think is his name. He was on CNBC, and he was talking about he only voted for that quarter point because of the geopolitical risk. He wanted a half point. In fact, he wants to front load a lot of these hikes into the first half of this year. And then he also believes the neutral rate, which he's way off on that, but the neutral rate's somewhere between 2.25 and 2.5. I'd call that the collapsing rate, if anything. But anyway, very interesting because that's two voting members, I believe, that are in favor of at least a 0.5 point hike coming up. And we will see more tthan likely a third or more people coming out here for the quarter point, or I mean a 0.5 point at least. And then you're going to see some interesting stuff because even with that quarter point, now you're seeing the 5s and 10s like flattening out that yield curve. I haven't even looked overseas to see what they're doing because I know that England raised a quarter point as well. But anyway, go to the market. The market has been rip roaring the last few days, which is pretty outstanding. And not in a good way. And I mean, as you got crushing volatilities, you had a ripping roar day in the S&P 500, and then essentially, or a couple of days, and essentially in the Nasdaq and the Dow, which to me is precarious at best. You have a number of factors. Now I'm going to go over a couple of these things. I want to keep this under 20 minutes like I normally do, and my brain's just like firing off the cylinders on a bunch of things. But let's start with some anecdotal inflationary data, and this is from me. Like I've talked about egg prices before. Now the egg prices are solidly over 10 and a half, pushing towards $11 for 60 pack of eggs, which is the bulk stuff. That's what I usually get. I haven't looked at the individuals, but that's pretty outstanding because usually back like last year, you can get those for like $6.90 something. So that's a huge price increase. But that can, on the egg side of thing, that's not only inflation that's driving that, but there's also a supply restriction. Because if you haven't heard, there has been over this last year a bout of avian flu that's ravaging the U.S. Chicken and turkey stock, or throughout. It's been in the Midwest. I believe like some almost 3 million birds have died. It's an incredible instance. It's gonna restrict supply on eggs, and possibly when we get into later part of the year into the turkey prices when we get into Thanksgiving time. So that's part of it, but it's been going up before that, and this is only exacerbating it because you're playing on one side, one curve. Anyway, so then here's the other thing I go to. So I go to another aisle, and I've talked about this before. There's a specific tomato sauce that I like to get, and go there. And it started this about pandemic before. It's always been roughly about 38 to 42 cents a can, like a little small can, enough for a guy to eat. Make a little bit of sauce or whatever for spaghetti or something like that. Well, that jumped up to 48 cents. And then that was, 48 cents. That was probably a few months ago. And then yesterday I saw it as 53 cents a can. So you think about the percentage jumps in those prices. That's pretty incredible for such a short period of time. Still seeing the meat shortages there. Still seeing high prices there. The normal pound of hamburger, usually I've even dropped down to when I do get hamburger to the 70. the majority of fat one, you know what I mean? The real nasty, but it tastes pretty good. I mean, you do some stuff with it, but that is now solidly over $4. You used to get that for three something. So those are anecdotal deals. But then we look. Here's the other thing. So let's get away from the anecdotal. Let's look at some data. And I'll point you. If you just Google the Federal Reserve balance sheet, you can look at that thing, and you can see, there's some different metrics that they've changed a little bit, and there's some, blips in there. But you can see that they're budgeting, despite seeing that their QE is over. Their balance sheet, despite QE supposedly being over, as reported on March 14th. I think it was like some 46 billion or something was added to it in government debt. So I thought they were supposed to be done, buying that stuff. But their balance sheet expanded. It's flattening out, granted, but it's expanded. Then you look at M2 money supply and all this other jazz, and you can see that's inflation. That's the money creation that's occurring in the system. So that's one thing. Like I said, the last one, you can look at all these other data points, import, export prices, just the CPI stuff that we're getting, the Fed's PCE, which we haven't even got February's number yet, I don't believe. You can see some other metrics if you really want to dig into them. If you look at, here's another one where inflation does show up when people, and that's because every time you take out a loan, you're creating money in a sense through the fractional reserve system. So every time you're taking a mortgage out, well, what we're seeing now in the housing market, mortgages dropping off, and that's pretty indicative, with raising rates. You have the average, I think the 30-year now, when I'm looking at advertised at 4.5. But so you're having declining mortgages being taken out, the housing demand is decreasing, but the price is still spiking. What was I getting at that? Anyway, the housing market, let's go into that because I pull away from the inflation, go into housing. The housing market is going to have one hell of a time here soon. And that you see that as the price, this is inflationary. The housing market, say the year over year, the average housing price, I believe, went up 15-something%. We're at 300 and probably, I think, it's 70-something thousand. Incredible amount. You just look at now in isolation, or in the last 20 years, you see that. But look at throughout time, the relationship between the average income and housing and vehicles or essential goods. Just take anything in the Maslow hierarchy of needs and look at that within the average income, and you can really see a huge disparity that's taken place since especially 1971, when we officially detached from gold, and you can see that disparity, especially with average income or median income, let's just say. So the housing market doesn't look good because you have these other rates that are going to raise. You're going to see that 30-year mortgage go up. You're going to see a lot of people all of a sudden underwater. And I don't know what you do because I've not been underwater in there. I don't know if some people are in this an investment if they have secondary homes. I don't know if it is, the BlackRock types have it. I don't think they really care. They're going to operate for cash flow. There's a lot of things. This could go a lot of ways. I have no real clue. I just know that this is not good. And this will, in essence, necessitate the crash. But this is what happens if you do not have a free market in money. If you don't have a free market in interest rates, the price of money, in money itself, because it's half of every transaction, then you don't have adequate pricing discovery in any other good or service. So when you artificially hold these things down, you have these exorbitant ups and downs in the markets trying to find an actual price based off whatever the case of money is at the time. But it all is constantly fluctuating. So you never really get a good gist of what the real market is. You get huge overshoots and huge overcorrections, which don't happen when you have an actual free market economy and a free enterprise economy. So anyway, that's a whole nother thing. To me, this is me personally. Oil's up too. Not that. So oil's up because of inflationary reasons. And the possibility. So remember I said that the supply really hasn't changed. Well, here's where it is going to change, because now Russia has come out and they have alluded to the fact that they might be closing up about a third of their supplies. So that is a supply shock. All right. But this is also inflationary. Either way, whether they're online or not, the price is going to steadily go up, just because the amount of current dollars this is what it's denominated in and what it's used primarily to transact in oil is increasing still. But you can also affect that price with supply shock, and if Russia does pull a third of it, then you have those issues. But that's a whole nother topic. I'm going through all these different goods right now. The other top story, I guess I should have led with this, is the fact that the New York Times, I think everybody else has covered this, has came out and they've admitted that the Hunter Biden laptop thing was in fact correct, which we all knew that. But some, diehards actually believe in the corporate media, thought it was a hoax, Russian disinformation. And at this point, can you believe anything that our media says? I have to look at everything with skepticism. But if it is true, we looked at it, people have been saying this, there's a lot of interesting financial connections between the Bidens that's been corroborated between them and the Chinese government and the Ukrainian government. And in lieu with some of those businesses, the Russian government. So who is tied to who? And if not this case that needs to be pushed forward for prosecutions or to look into the president's ties and the corruption, then what case should we look into? Because this seems to be the most overt and most egregious that I've ever encountered. I'm trying to think in my head real quick if there's been anything else that's been so overtly corrupt in the president's side of things. Of course, there's congressmen and some other interesting characters that, of course, are corrupt. And I can think of some interesting cases of people finding like frozen money, and there's a bunch of stuff that's gone on that people have been caught, and the people that haven't been caught, those are the people who need to be held accountable. You can't tell me the Clintons and Pelosi's that are not corrupt, or the Feinstein types, their connections to the Chinese government as well. Just some craziness, and nobody's been held accountable. That's another thing. You go down the node from the monetary system, go down these other nodes. From that node, it branched off into these other nodes of corruption, cultural degradation. It keeps going until we're presented with what we see. So if you go back, I call it the root cause, start monetary system, which branches off into cultural and political corruption, and then ipso finitum down to where we're at. So, what else is there? There's just, we could talk a little bit about the Russia, but I think we beat that up. The Russians, like I said, don't believe anything. Like I said, the tactic, it's a modern day siege warfare. They've isolated these groups in the towns. They've cut off their ability to really, besides, to the internet, communicate, but they can't traverse the terrain. They can't maneuver forces like you would. I think that now the only thing I've changed, I don't think they're going to cut off everything through the river. I think Putin really legitimately wants to just liberate Donbass and then claim Crimea. And I think his tactics is the kind of interdict, but I can't remember the tactical term, like almost like a feint attack to keep them in place, keep a majority, to spread out the Ukrainian forces, to keep them, like, by coming from the north and from the northeast, to keeping those forces honest, so they could not consolidate or amass forces down in the southeast region and put up more of a fight. So I think it turns out, in my opinion, that's his plan, because it seems like everything we see is that he's kind of that seems to be his modus operandi right now. And despite what you're saying, I think they're actually not. They could go in there heavy-handed. They're not going as heavy-handed as what they could and what we're used to. This blitzkrieg style warfare. Which, if we were fighting them and we were able to do that, we would have the momentum and we would roll Russia. To be totally honest, away from what I've seen, they just can't play this slow maneuver, this slow warfare. We are fast and agile for the most part, in some of our units that can really wreak havoc on a situation like this. Not the fact that they'd fight us like this, but if we so happen to. And I still stand by the fact that we are giving all these weapons at this point in the war which is already lost for the Ukrainians, in my opinion. Giving them weapons is only giving the Russian weapons, ipso facto. So I don't know what to tell you about that. I know I said I wasn't going to get into the Russian thing, but it's hard for me not to. And they also came out, like I said, with the biolab stuff, some more things. And I believe I had already given you that information with an article, and I put in the link, and it talked about some of those leaks, the bioweapons leaks. And the Russians have the documents now through some of the labs, and they are releasing those. And they are talking about how some of the Ukrainians weren't, some of these labs, nationals weren't even allowed in there. And it's pretty astounding. Now, you can't believe everything the Russians say. Like I said, you have to look at it with a discerning eye. Like I haven't even seen this report, but I heard it on the news. And of course, the Western media is going to, nitpick at whatever they do say wrong. With, supposedly some Tennessee National Guardsmen were killed. Of course, they weren't. I mean, they checked on them, they're fine. When I went over there was an articles written about my unit, my Marine unit, were supposedly some kind of hit team that was sent over there, and some kind of weird jazz. I mean, it sounded cool. It sounded like we were like really high speed, low drag type unit, like we're Ricky Recons and stuff running around and assassinating people. But that's couldn't be further for the truth, really. I mean. But anyway, they had some weird articles. So I understand Russian propaganda. So if you know how to look through that. Now, Western propaganda is a little bit different, because it seems like instead of taking a story that's truth and then kind of melding it around there, and you can actually find that kernel of truth. A lot of our stories are just ignore the truth, deny, and have experts write stories countering the actual truth, and then a few months later, the truth will finally be acknowledged, or a year later in this Hunter Biden thing. But we can get into Fauci too. Fauci's popping his head up all of a sudden, saying that we might have the whole lockdowns. I mean, this guy has got. I'm going to do a little. I'm almost done with this. I'm going to do kind of a book review on JFK's book. I'm almost finished that thing. But RFK's book on Fauci. It's illuminating. I knew a lot of this stuff, but he goes into some super detail. And this guy, why he hasn't been investigated or being tried or in prison for a number of things for what he's done, not only on a personal level, but what he's done to the scientific community through his, network of, people that he's built up around him. I don't know. There's got to be some kind of justice. And I think he should have just kept his head in the sand. And I don't know, man. If there's a Dr. Evil out there, this is it. This guy's it. So I'll do that, and I just gotta finish, and I'm almost done. But it's pretty enlightening. It's like how do these people get away with it? And it goes back, and I'll give Michael Savage credit for this, because I think this is one of the reasons why we don't get the justice that the equal justice under the law that we all should strive for in the system, and that is there is a government media complex. Once they get tied in with each other, they look out for each other's back. Some of it has to do with access. Some of it has to do with money. Some of it has to do with jobs, the loopholes. Some of it has to do with power. Power. If you've ever been around people that, actually get power, like power is it's like the most, drug that has the most power over people just in general. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there, and we'll go on another time over some of this stuff. Like I said, I'm going to do a few other things, and we'll see what happens over the weekend with this Russian deal. But anyway, I'll talk to you later. Peace.